The morning Sarah Mitchell discovered the envelope tucked beneath her windshield wiper, she'd already been awake for 3 hours, unable to shake the feeling that something in her life needed to change. At 52, she lived in a comfortable suburban home in Portland, Oregon, worked as a nurse at the local hospital, and had raised 2 children who were now building their own lives across the country. But lately, the silence in her house had become deafening, and the routine that once gave her comfort now felt like a cage she had built around herself without realizing it. The envelope was weathered, as if it had traveled through many hands before finding its way to her car. Inside was a single photograph of a woman she didn't recognize, standing in front of a small bakery with a painted sign that read "Second Chances." On the back, in careful handwriting, were the words, "She would have wanted you to know." There was no signature, no return address, nothing to indicate who had left it or why. Sarah studied the woman in the photo. She appeared to be in her 60s, with kind eyes and a gentle smile that seemed to hold secrets Sarah couldn't begin to guess. That evening, Sarah found herself unable to concentrate on anything else. She had shown the photo to her colleague Diana during their lunch break, hoping for some insight. But Diana had been just as puzzled. "Maybe it's meant for someone else," Diana had suggested. But something in Sarah's gut told her this message was meant specifically for her. She examined every detail of the photograph: the bakery's weathered brick exterior, the flower boxes beneath the windows, the way the afternoon light caught the gold lettering on the sign. There was something hauntingly familiar about it all, though she couldn't place why. 3 days passed before Sarah decided to search for the bakery online. She typed "Second Chances Bakery" into her computer, expecting to find nothing, or perhaps hundreds of results from across the country. Instead, she found exactly one match: a small bakery in Astoria, a coastal town just 90 minutes from Portland. The website was simple, featuring photos of fresh bread, pastries, and a brief message: "Every day is a chance to start again." The woman from the photograph appeared in several images, always with that same warm smile, always seeming to look directly at whoever was viewing the page. Sarah's decision to drive to Astoria that Saturday morning surprised even herself. She hadn't taken a spontaneous trip in years, always planning everything meticulously, always having a purpose and a timeline. But something about this mystery had awakened a part of her that had been dormant for too long. As she drove along the winding coastal highway, watching the morning mist roll off the Pacific Ocean, she felt a mixture of anticipation and nervousness that reminded her of being young, when every day held the possibility of adventure. The town of Astoria appeared through the fog like something from a dream. Victorian houses perched on hillsides, their painted facades bright against the gray morning sky. The Columbia River stretched wide and powerful where it met the sea, and fishing boats bobbed in the harbor like patient sentinels. Sarah had been here before, years ago, with her ex-husband Mark and their children, but it felt different now, as if she were seeing it for the first time through her own eyes, rather than through the lens of wife and mother. Finding the bakery proved easier than she expected. It sat on a quiet street corner, looking exactly as it had in the photograph, though perhaps a bit more weathered by the coastal weather. The painted sign still read "Second Chances," though the gold lettering had faded slightly. Through the windows, Sarah could see warm light and the silhouettes of people moving about inside. She sat in her car for several minutes, questioning what she was doing here, wondering if she should just turn around and go home. But then she remembered the hollow feeling that had been growing in her chest for months, and she knew she had to go inside. The bell above the door chimed softly as Sarah entered, and the aroma of fresh bread and cinnamon enveloped her immediately. The interior was cozy and welcoming, with mismatched tables and chairs that somehow created a perfect harmony. Local artwork adorned the walls, and soft jazz played from hidden speakers. Behind the counter stood a young woman with bright red hair pulled back in a bandana, her arms dusted with flour. She looked up with a smile that was both professional and genuinely warm. "Welcome to Second Chances," the young woman said. "First time here?" Sarah nodded, still taking in the atmosphere of the place. "Well, you've picked a good day. We just pulled the cinnamon rolls out of the oven, and they're Eleanor's special recipe. Nobody makes them quite like she does." The casual mention of the name made Sarah's pulse quicken. Could Eleanor be the woman in the photograph? Before Sarah could ask, a voice called from the kitchen. "Lily, could you help me with these loaves? My arthritis is acting up again." Through the doorway behind the counter emerged the woman from the photograph, though her hair was now more silver than brown, and lines mapped stories across her face. She stopped short when she saw Sarah, her expression shifting from distracted to something Sarah couldn't quite read. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition, though they had never met. I'll be right there, Eleanor, Lily said, then turned back to Sarah. Can I get you something while you're waiting? Coffee? Maybe one of those cinnamon rolls I mentioned? Sarah found her voice with difficulty. Actually, I received this. She pulled the photograph from her purse and placed it on the counter. Both women's eyes widened, and Eleanor moved closer, her movements careful but purposeful. Eleanor picked up the photograph with trembling hands, studying it as if seeing a ghost. Where did you get this? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sarah explained about finding it on her car, about the message on the back, about the strange compulsion that had brought her here. As she spoke, Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, though she was smiling. Oh, my dear, Eleanor said, reaching across the counter to take Sarah's hand. I've been wondering when you would come. The confusion must have shown on Sarah's face, because Eleanor squeezed her hand gently. Lily, would you mind watching the front for a bit? I need to speak with… She paused, looking at Sarah expectantly. Sarah supplied. Sarah Mitchell. Something flickered in Eleanor's eyes at the name. I need to speak with Sarah privately. We'll be in the back room. Lily nodded, seeming to understand that this was something significant. Eleanor led Sarah through the kitchen, where the warmth from the ovens made the air shimmer, past racks of cooling bread and trays of pastries waiting to be decorated. They entered a small room that served as both office and break room, with a worn couch, a desk cluttered with papers, and walls covered in photographs. Eleanor gestured for Sarah to sit, then lowered herself carefully into an armchair across from her. Your maiden name, Eleanor began without preamble. Was it Thompson? Sarah's breath caught. She hadn't used that name in over 25 years. Yes, but how did you… Eleanor reached for a photo album on the desk, its leather cover cracked with age. She opened it carefully, turning pages until she found what she was looking for. This was my sister, she said, pointing to a photograph of a young woman who looked remarkably like the Eleanor of 30 years ago. Margaret Thompson, Maggie, we called her. The name hit Sarah like a physical blow. Margaret Thompson, her father's sister, who had died when Sarah was just 5 years old. She had only the vaguest memories of a woman who smelled like vanilla and told wonderful stories, who had disappeared from her life so suddenly that her young mind had never fully processed the loss. Aunt Maggie? Sarah whispered, and Eleanor nodded, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. She was my best friend, not just my sister, Eleanor said. When she got sick, she made me promise to look after her family. But your father… Robert was so angry after she died. He blamed everyone, including me. He cut off all contact, moved you all to Portland. I tried to stay in touch, but he returned every letter unopened. Eventually, I had to respect his wishes, though it broke my heart. She paused, wiping her eyes with a handkerchief pulled from her pocket. I've thought about you so often over the years, wondered how you were doing, whether you remembered her at all. Sarah's mind reeled, trying to process this unexpected connection to a past she had barely known existed. Her father had died 10 years ago, taking his secrets and his anger with him. Her mother, who had passed just 2 years later, had rarely spoken of his family. Now, sitting in this small room above a bakery, Sarah was discovering an entire piece of her history that had been hidden from her. But who left the photograph? Sarah asked, though part of her was beginning to suspect the answer. Eleanor smiled sadly. That would be my daughter, Rebecca. She's been after me for years to try to reconnect with Maggie's family. She must have done some detective work, found out where you lived. She has her aunt's determination, that one, always thinking she knows what's best for everyone. Despite her words, there was deep affection in Eleanor's voice. They talked for hours, Eleanor filling in the gaps in Sarah's family history. She learned that Maggie had been an artist, that she had traveled the world before settling down, that she had opened the first incarnation of this very bakery before her illness. Eleanor had kept it running in her memory, maintaining Maggie's recipes, her philosophy that everyone deserved a second chance at happiness, no matter what life had thrown at them. She used to say that bread was like life, Eleanor explained, leading Sarah back into the kitchen where Lily was pulling a fresh batch of sourdough from the oven. You mix together simple ingredients, give them time and the right conditions, and they transform into something nourishing and beautiful. But sometimes the dough doesn't rise the way you expect, or the oven runs too hot, or you forget to set the timer. That doesn't mean you throw it all away. You learn, you adjust, you try again. As the afternoon wore on, customers came and went, many of them clearly regulars who knew Eleanor well. Sarah watched the easy way Eleanor interacted with them, asking after their families, remembering their usual orders, offering a kind word or a joke as needed. This was what community looked like, Sarah realized, something she had lost somewhere along the way in her busy life. A woman named Grace, probably in her 70s, settled at a corner table with her tea and scone, and Eleanor introduced her to Sarah. "Grace is one of our success stories," Eleanor said with a wink. Grace laughed, a sound like silver bells. "Success might be overstating it, but I'm definitely a second chances graduate." She explained that she had come to Astoria 5 years ago after her husband's death, lost and alone, and had found not just a bakery, but a family in Eleanor and the regular customers who gathered here. "That's what this place does," Grace said, gesturing around the warm space. "It gives you a soft place to land when life knocks you down." Eleanor has a gift for seeing what people need, sometimes before they know it themselves. Sarah thought about her own life, about the routines that had become ruts, about the way she had been going through the motions without really living. Maybe she had needed this strange journey more than she knew. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that reflected off the river, Eleanor invited Sarah to stay for dinner. "Nothing fancy," she said, "just soup and bread, but I'd love for you to meet Rebecca properly. She should know that her meddling actually worked for once." Sarah accepted, surprising herself again with her willingness to extend this unexpected adventure. Rebecca arrived just as Eleanor was ladling homemade clam chowder into bowls. She was in her 30s, with her mother's kind eyes but a more direct manner. When Eleanor introduced them, Rebecca had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "I'm sorry for the mysterious approach," she said. "I wasn't sure a straightforward letter would work. Mom's been talking about finding Maggie's family for so long, and when I finally tracked you down, I thought maybe a little mystery would be more likely to bring you here than a cold call from a stranger." Over dinner, the three women talked and laughed, sharing stories and finding unexpected connections. Rebecca was also in healthcare, working as a physical therapist in town. She understood the challenges Sarah faced in her nursing career, the emotional toll of caring for others while sometimes neglecting oneself. "It's why I make Mom take at least one day off a week," Rebecca said. "She'd work herself into the ground otherwise, trying to take care of everyone who walks through that door." As the evening wound down, Eleanor pressed a bag of fresh rolls into Sarah's hands, along with a worn recipe card. "This was Maggie's favorite," she said. "Her honey wheat bread. I've made it every week for 35 years. Maybe it's time it went home to family." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes as she accepted the gifts, understanding that they represented more than just bread and recipes. They were a connection to a past she had never fully known and an invitation to a future she hadn't expected. The drive home was quiet, Sarah's mind full of the day's revelations. She thought about the threads that connect people across time and distance, about the family we're born into and the family we choose, about the courage it takes to reach out after years of silence. When she arrived home, her house didn't feel quite as empty as it had that morning. She placed Maggie's recipe card on her kitchen counter, running her fingers over the faded handwriting, and made a decision. The following weekend, Sarah returned to Second Chances, this time bringing her camera and a notebook. She had asked Eleanor if she could document the bakery's story, the recipes, the philosophy behind it. "I don't want Maggie's legacy to be lost again," she had explained, and Eleanor had tearfully agreed. What started as a simple documentation project soon evolved into something more. A book about second chances, about the power of food to build community, about the unexpected ways life can surprise us if we're willing to follow mysterious photographs to small coastal towns. Over the following months, Sarah found herself making the drive to Astoria regularly. Sometimes she helped in the bakery, learning the rhythm of kneading dough and the patience required for proper proofing. Other times she sat with her laptop in the corner, writing down the stories Eleanor shared about Maggie, about the early days of the bakery, about the countless lives that had been touched within these walls. Regular customers began to recognize her, sharing their own stories of how they had found their way to second chances. There was Marcus, a widower who had started coming for coffee and stayed for the conversation, eventually finding love again with another regular customer. There was Jenny, a young mother who had arrived in town with nothing but her daughter and a desperate need for a fresh start, who now managed the lunch shift and was saving money for culinary school. There was Robert. The name had made Sarah's heart skip, a veteran who credited Eleanor's patient friendship with helping him through his darkest days after returning from deployment. Each story added another layer to Sarah's understanding of what this place meant to people. It wasn't just about the excellent bread or the cozy atmosphere. It was about being seen, being welcomed, being given space to heal and grow. Eleanor had created something special here, carrying on Maggie's vision of a place where broken things could be made whole again, where flour and water and yeast could become not just bread, but hope. Sarah's own transformation didn't happen overnight. There were days when the drive felt too long, when the pull of her old routines was strong, when she questioned what she was doing, spending so much time on this project. But each time she walked through the bakery door, each time Eleanor greeted her with that warm smile that was so like Maggie's in the old photographs, each time she felt the satisfaction of pulling a perfectly risen loaf from the oven, she knew she was exactly where she needed to be. Her children noticed the change first. "You sound different, Mom," her daughter Emma said during one of their phone calls. "Happier, more like yourself." Sarah hadn't realized how much of herself she had lost until she began finding it again in the most unexpected place. Her son David, always more reserved, simply said, "I'm glad you're doing something for yourself for once." But she could hear the relief in his voice. 6 months after that first visit, Sarah made a decision that would have seemed impossible before. She reduced her hours at the hospital, choosing to work part-time so she could spend more days in Astoria. Her colleagues were surprised, but Diana understood. "You've been running on empty for too long," she said. "It's about time you refilled your own cup." The metaphor made Sarah laugh, thinking of all the coffee cups she had filled and refilled at second chances, each one representing a small act of connection. Eleanor's health began to decline that winter, her arthritis making it harder for her to manage the physical demands of the bakery. Sarah and Rebecca worked together to help more, bringing in additional staff, modernizing some processes while being careful to maintain the heart of what made the place special. Eleanor supervised from her chair, offering guidance and stories, ensuring that every new person understood that they weren't just making bread, they were continuing a legacy. One snowy morning in January, Eleanor called Sarah into the back room. On the desk was a manila envelope thick with papers. "I've been thinking," Eleanor began, her voice careful. "This place needs someone who understands what it really means. Someone who has Maggie's blood but also gets why we do things the way we do." She pushed the envelope towards Sarah. "These are partnership papers. Rebecca and I have discussed it. We want you to be part of the official family here, not just the honorary one." Sarah stared at the envelope, overwhelmed by the gesture. "Eleanor, I don't know the first thing about running a bakery." Eleanor laughed, the sound still bright despite her age. "You know the important things. The rest you can learn. Besides, you wouldn't be doing it alone. This place has always been about community, about people helping each other. That won't change." The decision to accept the partnership was both the hardest and easiest choice Sarah had ever made. Hard because it meant acknowledging that her old life no longer fit, that she had outgrown the safe boundaries she had set for herself. Easy because it felt like coming home to a place she had never known she was looking for. The legal details took time to sort out, but by spring, Sarah was officially part of Second Chances. The transition wasn't without its challenges. There were days when the early morning baking schedule exhausted her, when difficult customers tested her patience, when the financial realities of running a small business seemed overwhelming. But there were more days when the smell of fresh bread filled her with joy, when a customer's face lit up at their first bite of Eleanor's famous cinnamon rolls, when she looked around the bustling bakery and felt Maggie's presence in every corner. Sarah began incorporating her nursing background into the bakery's mission. She started a program where they donated day-old bread to the local shelter, organized nutrition workshops for families struggling with food insecurity, and created a quiet hour each morning where people dealing with anxiety or sensory issues could shop in a calmer environment. Eleanor watched these additions with pride, often commenting that Maggie would have loved seeing her vision expand in such meaningful ways. One year after finding the photograph on her windshield, Sarah stood in the bakery before dawn, preparing for the day ahead. The familiar routine of measuring flour, activating yeast, and kneading dough had become a meditation, a daily practice of transformation that mirrored her own journey. As she worked, she thought about the stranger who had left that envelope, Rebecca, who had become like a niece to her, whose bold action had changed everything. The bell chimed as the first customer of the day entered, an elderly man named Francis, who came every morning for his coffee and crossword puzzle. "Morning, Sarah," he said, settling into his usual spot by the window. "What's the special today?" Sarah smiled, wiping her flour-dusted hands on her apron. "Eleanor's honey wheat bread, fresh from the oven. And I'm trying out a new recipe for apple turnovers. Maggie's notes mention them, but we've never found the complete recipe. I'm experimenting." "Sounds perfect," Francis said. "You know, this place has been special since Maggie's day. But you've brought something new to it. A different kind of energy. Good energy. Sarah felt warmth spread through her chest at the compliment. She had worried about changing things, about not living up to the legacy she had inherited. But comments like Frances's reminded her that growth and change were part of honoring the past, not betraying it. As the morning rush began, Sarah moved through the familiar dance of serving customers, refilling coffee, bringing out fresh batches of pastries. Lily worked beside her, now a full partner in the business, her artistic touch evident in the beautifully decorated cakes that had become a signature item. Rebecca stopped by on her way to work, grabbing her usual coffee and stealing a quick hug from her mother, who was holding court at her favorite table, regaling a group of tourists with stories about the bakery's history. During a brief lull, Sarah stepped outside for a moment of fresh air. The morning fog was lifting off the river, revealing the mountains beyond. She thought about the woman she had been a year ago, competent, responsible, but somehow disconnected from her own life. That woman would never have followed a mysterious photograph to a small coastal town, would never have been open to the possibility that life could surprise her after 50. A young woman approached hesitantly, clutching a worn notebook. "Excuse me, are you Sarah? The one who's writing the book about this place?" When Sarah nodded, the woman's face lit up. "I just wanted to thank you. I read the article you wrote for the local paper about second chances and finding community. It it gave me hope. I just moved here after my divorce and I've been feeling so lost. But reading about how you found your way here, how this place helped you heal, it made me think maybe I can heal too." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes as she invited the woman inside, introducing her to Eleanor and offering her a warm cinnamon roll and a cup of coffee. This was what it was all about, she realized. Not just the bread or the building, but the continuous cycle of people finding their way to a place where they could rest, recover, and eventually reach out to help others do the same. As the day wore on, Sarah found herself thinking about the nature of legacy. Maggie had left behind recipes and a philosophy of welcome. Eleanor had kept that legacy alive, nurturing it through decades of change. Now it was Sarah's turn to carry it forward, adding her own thread to the tapestry while honoring those who had come before. That evening, after the last customer had left and the ovens had cooled, Sarah sat with Eleanor in the quiet bakery. They were planning the menu for the upcoming anniversary celebration, 36 years since Eleanor had reopened the bakery after Maggie's death. "I want to make all of her favorites," Eleanor said, her fingers tracing the worn recipes. "The honey wheat, of course, and those lemon bars she perfected the summer before she got sick. Oh, and we have to attempt her chocolate croissants, even though I've never quite mastered them the way she did." "We'll figure it out together," Sarah assured her. "Maybe Rebecca knows something about the technique, or we could ask some of the old-timers who might remember." Eleanor smiled, reaching over to squeeze Sarah's hand. "You know what Maggie would have loved most about all this? That our family and chosen family are working together. That was always her dream. A place where the boundaries between stranger and friend, customer and family could dissolve." As Sarah drove home that night, she pulled over at the same viewpoint where she had stopped on that first drive to Astoria. The sun was setting over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. She thought about the mysterious photograph that had started this journey, about the courage it had taken for Rebecca to reach out across years of silence, about the grace with which Eleanor had welcomed her into not just the family, but the family business. Her phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Mom, David and I have been talking. We want to come visit next weekend, see this magical bakery you're always talking about. Maybe we can help with the anniversary prep?" Sarah smiled, typing back her enthusiastic yes. Her children had been supportive but distant from her new life. Having them come to second chances felt like another circle completing. The anniversary celebration was a testament to the community that had grown around the bakery. People came from all over town and beyond, sharing stories of how second chances had touched their lives. Marcus and his new wife brought their wedding album, showing photos of the reception they had held in the bakery. Jenny presented Eleanor with a certificate. She had been accepted to culinary school with a scholarship, her dream finally within reach. Robert had brought his therapy dog, offering comfort to anyone who needed it, paying forward the support he had received. David and Emma had thrown themselves into the preparations with unexpected enthusiasm. David, who had inherited his grandfather's height and broad shoulders, proved surprisingly adept at kneading large batches of dough. Emma, with her eye for design, had created beautiful displays and helped Lily with decorating special cakes for the occasion. Watching her children work alongside Eleanor and Rebecca, Sarah felt the past and future knitting together in ways she never could have imagined. During the celebration, Eleanor stood with Sarah's help to address the gathered crowd. Her voice was frailer than it once had been, but her spirit remained undimmed. 36 years ago, I reopened this bakery with a broken heart and a promise to my sister. I thought I was honoring Maggie's memory, but what I've learned is that memory isn't something we preserve like a photograph. It's something we live, something we share, something that grows and changes with each person who walks through our door. She paused, looking directly at Sarah. This year brought an unexpected gift, family returning to where they belong. Sarah carries Maggie's blood, but more importantly, she carries her spirit. She understands that second chances aren't just about starting over. They're about building on what came before, about turning loss into love, about creating space for others to heal and grow. I couldn't have asked for a better person to help carry this place into the future. The crowd erupted in applause, and Sarah found herself enveloped in hugs from people who had become her community. Through the tears blurring her vision, she caught sight of the photograph that had started it all, now framed and hanging on the wall among dozens of other photos documenting the bakery's history. Rebecca had been right. Sometimes the indirect path is the only one that leads us where we need to go. As the celebration wound down, Sarah helped Eleanor to her apartment above the bakery. The older woman was tired but radiant, her eyes bright with satisfaction. It was perfect, Eleanor said, settling into her favorite chair. Maggie would have loved every minute of it. All these lives touched, all these connections made. It's what she always envisioned. A place where love could rise like good bread, where broken hearts could be kneaded back together. Thank you, Sarah said, the words inadequate for the depth of her gratitude. For welcoming me, for trusting me with this legacy, for showing me that it's never too late for a second chance. Eleanor waved away the thanks. Oh, my dear, you've given as much as you've received. You've brought new life to this old place, honored the past while making room for the future. That's no small thing. In the months that followed, Sarah continued to balance her work at the hospital with her responsibilities at the bakery. She finished her book about second chances, weaving together stories of resilience and community, recipes and remembrances. When it was published, with proceeds going to support the bakery's community programs, it touched readers far beyond their small coastal town. Letters arrived from people who had been inspired to seek their own second chances, to build community in their own ways. One letter particularly moved Sarah. It was from a woman in Minnesota who had been estranged from her sister for 20 years. After reading Sarah's story about finding Eleanor and discovering her aunt's legacy, the woman had reached out to her sister. They were slowly rebuilding their relationship, one conversation at a time. Your story reminded me that it's never too late to heal old wounds, the woman wrote. Thank you for sharing your journey and giving me the courage to start my own. Eleanor's health continued to decline gradually, but her spirit remained vibrant. She spent her days in the bakery when she could, sharing stories with anyone who would listen, teaching the finer points of bread making to eager learners, and watching with satisfaction as Sarah and Rebecca worked together to maintain the bakery's mission while adapting to changing times. They had added online ordering for customers who couldn't make it to the physical location, started a subscription service that delivered hope along with fresh bread, and created a scholarship fund for aspiring bakers from disadvantaged backgrounds. On quiet mornings, Sarah often found herself standing in the spot where she had first entered the bakery, remembering the woman she had been, lost without knowing it, going through the motions of a life that no longer fit. The mysterious photograph had been a gift, she understood now, but not in the way she had first thought. It wasn't just about discovering family or finding a new purpose. It was about learning that life could still surprise her, that there were still adventures waiting, that the story she thought was nearly written still had chapters she couldn't imagine. 2 years after the anniversary celebration, on a foggy morning that reminded Sarah of her first drive to Astoria, Eleanor passed away peacefully in her sleep. The entire town mourned, understanding that they had lost not just a baker, but a beacon of hope and second chances. The funeral was held in the bakery itself, the space filled with flowers and the aroma of baking bread. Eleanor had insisted they not close, even for her funeral. Life goes on, she had said, and so should the bread making. Sarah and Rebecca stood together, supporting each other through the grief while also managing the endless stream of people who came to pay their respects. Each person had a story about how Eleanor had touched their life. A kind word during a dark time, a free meal when money was tight, a listening ear when no one else would hear them. It was a testament to a life lived in service to others, to the power of simple kindness multiplied over decades. In her will, Eleanor had left the bakery jointly to Rebecca and Sarah, along with a letter for each of them. Sarah read hers in the quiet of the early morning before the bakery opened, tears streaming down her face. "My dear Sarah," Eleanor had written, "you came to us seeking answers about the past, but what you brought was a future. You've shown that family isn't just about blood. It's about choosing to show up, to care, to continue the work of love even when it's hard. Take care of our bakery, but more importantly, take care of yourself. Remember that you deserve second chances too, as many as you need. All my love, Eleanor." The transition after Eleanor's passing was difficult, but the community rallied around the bakery. Regular customers stepped up to help during the busiest times. Local artists donated pieces for a memorial wall, and the newspaper ran a series of articles about Eleanor's legacy. Sarah and Rebecca worked through their grief by honoring Eleanor's memory in the best way they knew how, by keeping the doors open, the ovens warm, and the welcome genuine. One day, several months after Eleanor's passing, a young woman appeared at the bakery door just as Sarah was opening for the morning. She looked nervous, clutching a folder to her chest, her eyes darting between Sarah and the interior of the bakery. "Are you Sarah Mitchell?" she asked. When Sarah nodded, the woman took a deep breath. "My name is Claire. I think my grandmother used to know your aunt. I found some letters and photos, and I thought, well, I hoped you might want to see them." Sarah invited Claire inside, poured her a cup of coffee, and sat with her at Eleanor's favorite table. The letters were indeed from Maggie, written to Claire's grandmother during their college years. They painted a picture of a young woman full of dreams and plans, passionate about art and baking and bringing people together. There were photos too. Maggie and Claire's grandmother on various adventures, laughing at the camera, young and believing the whole world was possible. "My grandmother passed last year," Claire explained. "I've been going through her things, trying to understand who she was beyond being my grandma. When I found these letters mentioning the bakery, I looked it up online and found your story. I thought, I hoped maybe you'd want these pieces of your aunt's history." Sarah held the letters carefully, seeing her aunt through new eyes, not just as the vague memory of a vanilla-scented woman who told stories, but as a full person who had lived and loved and dreamed. As she talked with Claire, learning about another thread in the tapestry of connections that linked past and present, Sarah realized that this was how it would always be. People would find their way to second chances, bringing their stories and their wounds and their hopes. Some would stay for a moment, some for a lifetime, but each would leave changed and would change the place in return. It was a living legacy, one that honored the past while constantly evolving. The bakery continued to thrive under Sarah and Rebecca's joint management. They maintained Eleanor's traditions while adding their own touches. Sarah's healthcare background led to partnerships with local wellness programs, while Rebecca's connections in the physical therapy world brought in clients recovering from injuries who found solace in the simple act of kneading dough. They hired new staff, including Claire, who had decided to stay in Astoria and learn the art of bread making. Sarah's book about second chances had sparked interest from other communities, wanting to create their own spaces of healing and connection. She found herself traveling occasionally to speak at conferences or consult with groups starting community bakeries or cafes. But she always returned to Astoria, to the rhythm of early mornings and rising dough, to the bell chiming above the door and the familiar faces of regular customers. On the third anniversary of finding the photograph, Sarah created a new tradition. She called it Mystery Day. Once a year, she and Rebecca would choose someone in the community who needed a second chance and find a creative way to invite them into the bakery family. Sometimes it was as simple as a gift certificate left anonymously, sometimes as elaborate as a scavenger hunt through town. They never signed these gifts, preferring to let the mystery work its magic as it had for Sarah. David and Emma had become regular visitors, bringing their own friends and eventually significant others to experience the magic of second chances. Sarah watched her children bloom in the warm atmosphere of the bakery, saw them understand in a new way the choices she had made. Emma had even started talking about opening her own community space in Seattle, inspired by what her mother had helped build. One evening, as Sarah was closing up the bakery, she found a young woman sitting on the bench outside, tears streaming down her face. Sarah recognized the look, the lost expression of someone whose life had taken an unexpected turn. She sat down beside her, not saying anything at first, just offering her presence. Finally, the woman spoke. "I'm sorry, I heard about this place, that it's somewhere you can start over. I don't even know what I'm doing here." Sarah smiled gently, remembering her own confusion that first day. Sometimes we don't know why we're drawn somewhere until after we arrive. Would you like to come in? I was just about to make myself some tea and there's leftover soup from lunch. No pressure to talk, just an offer of warmth and food. The woman nodded, following Sarah inside, and another story began to unfold within the walls of Second Chances. As Sarah heated the soup and prepared tea, she thought about the circular nature of life, how we give and receive in turn, how a moment of kindness can ripple outward in ways we never see. She had come here seeking answers about a photograph and had found a family, a purpose, a new life she couldn't have imagined. Now she had the privilege of offering that same possibility to others. The woman, who eventually introduced herself as Patricia, slowly shared her story. A difficult divorce, a job loss, a feeling of being adrift at 45 with no clear direction. Sarah listened without judgment, occasionally asking a gentle question or offering a reflection from her own journey. By the time Patricia left, she had stopped crying and had even managed a small smile. "Thank you," she said. "I haven't felt heard like that in a very long time." "Come back tomorrow," Sarah suggested. "We're always looking for extra hands, and sometimes the best way to find your direction is to lose yourself in useful work for a while." Patricia promised to think about it, and Sarah watched her walk away with a lighter step than she had arrived with. It was a small interaction, but Sarah had learned that small interactions were often the ones that changed everything. As the seasons turned, Second Chances continued to be a beacon for those seeking connection, healing, and yes, second chances. The walls accumulated more photographs, more stories, more evidence of lives transformed by the simple act of breaking bread together. Sarah's book had been optioned for a documentary, with filmmakers interested in exploring how communities could create spaces of genuine support and connection in an increasingly disconnected world. Through it all, Sarah maintained the practices Eleanor had taught her: the early morning meditation of bread making, the patient listening to customers' stories, the belief that everyone who walked through the door had something to offer and something to receive. She kept Maggie's recipes alive while experimenting with new ones, understanding that tradition and innovation could dance together like flour and yeast, creating something both familiar and surprising. On quiet evenings, when the bakery was closed and she was preparing the starters for the next day's bread, Sarah often felt the presence of those who had come before. Maggie with her dreams and artistry, Eleanor with her steadfast love and determination, all the people who had found hope within these walls. She understood now that she was part of a continuum, a keeper of stories and recipes, a bridge between past and future. 5 years after finding the photograph, Sarah stood in the bakery on another foggy morning, preparing for the day ahead. The space was fuller now. They had expanded into the building next door, creating a community room for workshops and gatherings. The smell of baking bread still filled the air, that fundamental aroma that said home and comfort and possibility. Lily was training a new baker. Rebecca was setting up for a morning therapy bread-making session, and Claire was updating the bakery's social media with photos of the day's special offerings. Sarah pulled the first loaves from the oven, their crusts golden and crackling, and felt the same satisfaction she did every morning at this tangible evidence of transformation. Flour, water, yeast, and salt became sustenance through patience, attention, and care, just as broken lives could become whole again given the right environment and support. The bell chimed as the first customer arrived, and Sarah looked up with a welcoming smile, ready for whatever story would walk through the door. She thought of the woman she had been before, competent but incomplete, successful but unsatisfied, and felt grateful for the mysterious photograph that had led her here. Not everyone got such a clear invitation to change their life, but everyone, she had learned, deserved the chance to discover that it was never too late to start again. As the morning rush began and the bakery filled with the sounds of conversation and laughter, Sarah moved through her tasks with the ease of long practice. She exchanged greetings with regulars, welcomed newcomers, supervised the steady production of bread and pastries that would nourish the community throughout the day. In between customers, she stole glances at the photograph wall, where the image that had started it all held pride of place among the growing collection of memories. That afternoon, Patricia returned, as Sarah had hoped she would. She had been coming regularly for several weeks now, helping with various tasks and slowly finding her footing. Today, she brought someone with her, a friend who was also struggling with life changes. "I told her about this place," Patricia explained, "about how you helped me that night when I didn't know where else to go. She needs what I found here." Sarah welcomed them both, understanding that Patricia had crossed an important threshold, from receiver to giver, from helped to helper. This was the true magic of second chances. Sarah reflected as she watched Patricia introduce her friend to the rhythms of the bakery. It wasn't just about individual healing, but about creating a cycle of support that could sustain itself and grow. Each person who found help here eventually became someone who could offer help to others. It was Maggie's original vision made manifest, a place where the boundaries between giver and receiver, helper and helped, could dissolve in the shared act of creating something nourishing. As the years passed, Sarah continued to document the stories that flowed through Second Chances. Her second book focused on the recipes themselves, but each was accompanied by a story of transformation, of someone whose life had been changed by the simple act of making or sharing bread. The book became a bestseller, not because people needed another cookbook, but because they needed the hope that infused every page, the belief that change was possible, that community could be created, that the simplest acts of kindness could have profound effects. Rebecca had married and started a family, her children growing up in the bakery as she had, learning from infancy that this was a place of welcome and warmth. Sarah watched with joy as the next generation absorbed the values that had been passed down from Maggie, through Eleanor, and now through them. The children helped with simple tasks, their small hands learning to shape dough, their voices adding to the cheerful chaos of busy mornings. On her 60th birthday, Sarah received a surprise that moved her to tears. Rebecca had secretly contacted everyone who had been touched by Sarah's presence at Second Chances over the years. Letters poured in from across the country and beyond, from readers of her books who had been inspired to create community spaces in their own towns, from customers whose lives had been changed by a conversation over coffee and cinnamon rolls, from staff members who had found not just employment but purpose within the bakery's warm embrace. One letter particularly stood out. It was from the woman in Minnesota who had reconciled with her sister after reading Sarah's story. She wrote, "It's been 5 years since I first reached out to my sister, inspired by your journey. We now run a small cafe together in our hometown, a place where people can find the kind of welcome you described. We call it New Beginnings, and while it's not a bakery, it serves the same purpose, giving people a soft place to land when life gets hard. None of this would have existed without your courage to follow a mysterious photograph and share your story with the world." As Sarah read through the letters, surrounded by her chosen family in the bakery that had become her life's work, she thought about the nature of legacy. Maggie had left recipes and a vision. Eleanor had left a functioning bakery and a tradition of welcome. But Sarah realized her own legacy would be the proof that it was never too late to change course, that mysterious invitations should be followed, that opening ourselves to unexpected possibilities could lead to a life richer than we ever imagined. The bakery continued to evolve, adapting to new challenges while maintaining its core mission. When economic hardship hit the community, Second Chances became a hub for mutual aid, with those who could afford it quietly paying forward meals for those who couldn't. During the pandemic years that followed, they adapted with creativity and determination, offering virtual bread-making classes that connected people across distances, delivering hope along with contactless orders of fresh bread. Through every change, the essence of the place remained constant, a commitment to seeing each person who entered as worthy of kindness, patience, and the possibility of transformation. The photograph that had started Sarah's journey remained on the wall, now yellowed with age but still powerful in its simplicity. New visitors often asked about it, and Sarah or Rebecca would share the story, always ending with the invitation. You never know what small gesture might change someone's life completely. As Sarah approached her 65th birthday, she began thinking about her own succession planning. The bakery was thriving under the joint management of Rebecca and some of the younger staff members who had grown into leadership roles. Sarah's role had evolved too. Less hands-on baking, more mentoring, writing, and maintaining the spiritual heart of the place. She had learned from Eleanor the importance of knowing when to step back while still remaining present. One morning, as she was working on what she thought might be her final book, a memoir about the intersections of food, family, and second chances, a young man appeared at the bakery door. He looked uncertainly at the warm interior, then at a piece of paper in his hand, then back at the bakery. Sarah recognized the expression immediately. It was the same look she had worn all those years ago, standing outside with a mysterious photograph, wondering if she should go in. "Can I help you?" she asked gently, approaching the young man. He startled slightly, then held out the paper. It was a printed email from someone named James, with an old photograph attached, a picture of Eleanor and Maggie from decades ago, standing in front of the original bakery. The message was simple. "This is where you'll find what you're looking for." The young man, who introduced himself as Michael, explained that he had recently discovered he was adopted and had been searching for any connection to his birth family. The email had arrived from an address he didn't recognize, with no explanation beyond the photograph and message. "I don't even know what I'm looking for," he admitted, his voice carrying the same lost quality Sarah remembered from her own journey. As Sarah invited Michael inside and began to gently explore his story, she marveled at the patterns life created, the way stories echoed across generations. She didn't know yet how Michael connected to their bakery family. That would unfold in time. But she knew with certainty that he had been guided here for a reason, just as she had been, just as so many others had been over the years. Watching Rebecca welcome Michael with the same warm grace Eleanor had shown to Sarah, seeing the familiar cycle of confusion giving way to comfort, Sarah understood that second chances would continue long after she was gone. The seeds planted by Maggie's dream, nurtured by Eleanor's dedication, and expanded by Sarah's journey would keep growing, fed by each new person who found their way to this place of second chances. That evening, after Michael had left with a bag of fresh rolls and a promise to return the next day, Sarah stood in the quiet bakery, breathing in the lingering scent of yeast and flour and possibility. She thought about all the mornings she had stood in this same spot, all the lives that had intersected here, all the small miracles of human connection that had unfolded within these walls. The mysterious photograph had given her more than she ever could have imagined. Not just a family and a purpose, but proof that life could surprise us at any age, that there were always more chapters to write. As she locked up for the night, Sarah placed her hand briefly on the framed photograph that had started it all. Tomorrow would bring new stories, new challenges, new possibilities. But tonight, she was simply grateful for the journey that had brought her here, for the courage to follow a mystery to its beautiful, unexpected conclusion. The bell above the door chimed softly as she left, a sound that had become the soundtrack to her transformed life, a gentle reminder that every ending was also a beginning, every closed door an invitation to find the one meant to open. Outside, the fog was rolling in from the sea, wrapping the town in its soft embrace. Sarah breathed deeply, tasting salt and possibility in the air. Somewhere in the world, someone else was probably finding a mysterious message, feeling the pull of an unknown adventure, standing at the threshold of their own second chance. She smiled, knowing that the story would continue, that the gift of transformation would keep passing from hand to hand, life to life, like a recipe for bread that never failed to rise. Walking to her car, Sarah felt the satisfying tiredness that came from a day well lived, from work that mattered, from being part of something larger than herself. She had come to Astoria seeking answers about a photograph, and had found instead a truth about life, that it was never too late to begin again, that family could be chosen as well as born, that the most profound journeys often began with the smallest invitations. As she drove home through the foggy streets, Sarah whispered a thank you to Maggie, to Eleanor, to Rebecca for her brave action, and to the mysterious forces that had conspired to bring her to exactly where she needed to be. The bakery stood quietly in the darkness, its windows glowing softly from the security lights within. Inside, the ovens rested, the bread bowls waited. The chairs stood ready for tomorrow's gathering of souls seeking sustenance of all kinds. And on the wall, among dozens of other photographs documenting lives transformed and connections made, the original mysterious photograph kept its watch, a testament to the power of taking chances, of following unlikely paths, of believing that somewhere, somehow, second chances were always possible for those brave enough to walk through the door.